The air in the office was always thin, laced with the scent of expensive cleaning products and quiet desperation. I worked at Sterling & Sterling, a prestigious architectural firm that was a gilded cage for its employees. The pay was good, the prestige was better, but the price was your soul, paid in daily installments of anxiety and overtime. My name is Alara Vance, and I was a junior architect, clinging to the bottom rung of a ladder that seemed to stretch into infinity. My current project, my golden ticket and my personal hell, was the redesign of the penthouse apartment for Liam Blackwood. The name alone sent a ripple through the industry. A billionaire tech mogul, a disruptor, a man so wealthy he could buy and sell our firm before his morning coffee got cold. And my boyfriend Mark was the lead architect. I was his assistant on the project, the silent partner who did most of the creative legwork while he took the credit and schmoozed the clients. It was an arrangement I'd tolerated because I loved him, because I believed in our future, and because he'd promised me a partnership once this project was secured. "He's going to love it, Elle," Mark said, his back to me as he stared out of our apartment window. Our apartment. It felt less like mine every day. The Blackwood account is the key to everything. A house in the hills, that trip to Italy you're always going on about. I nodded, my fingers tracing the edge of my laptop. The structural integration of the smart glass is genius if I do say so myself. The way it transitions from opaque to transparent based on the sun's position. "We do say so ourselves," he corrected, turning to me with a practiced, charming smile. It was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. "Remember, in the meeting tomorrow, let me do the talking. Blackwood is intense. He doesn't like a lot of chatter." Translation: stay in your place. Be seen, not heard. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. This was my design, my baby, and I was being asked to be its nanny while the father took all the glory. The next morning, we stood in the gleaming, marble-lined lobby of the Ethelstan Tower, Blackwood's newest acquisition and the site of the penthouse. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs. It wasn't just the meeting. It was the lift. I have claustrophobia. A deep, primal, breath-stealing terror of enclosed spaces. It stemmed from a childhood incident, being locked in a forgotten root cellar for hours. The smell of damp earth, the consuming darkness, the absolute certainty that I would never be found, it had left a permanent scar on my psyche. Mark knew this. He'd held me through panic attacks in crowded elevators, he'd always taken the stairs with me in buildings under 10 floors. He knew. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth, all cool, hard surfaces and echoing silence. Our footsteps were unnaturally loud. Mark was preening, adjusting his tie, a portfolio under his arm containing my designs. "Ready?" he asked, his voice brisk. "As I'll ever be," I murmured, my eyes darting towards the bank of elevators. They were sleek, polished brass tombs. "Good. Remember, let me lead." We stepped into the elevator. It was larger than most, but the second the brass doors slid shut, the world shrunk. The air felt thin, recycled. I focused on my breathing, the techniques my therapist had taught me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I stared at my reflection in the door, a pale, wide-eyed woman in a sensible blazer, clinging to her professional composure by a thread. The elevator climbed, the numbers above the door lighting up in a silent, agonizingly slow sequence. 23. "Stop fidgeting, Alara," Mark said, not looking at me. "You look nervous. It's unprofessional." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. The sharp pain was a grounding anchor. We passed the 50th floor. And then it happened. The elevator gave a violent, shuddering lurch. My stomach plummeted. The lights flickered, died for a heart-stopping second, then came back on, casting a dim emergency glow. A low, ominous hum filled the small space, and then nothing. Utter, terrifying silence. We were stopped. Trapped. A wave of pure, undiluted panic crashed over me. My breath hitched, my lungs refusing to expand. The walls, which had seemed spacious moments before, now felt like they were pressing in, crushing me. "Mark." My voice was a thin, reedy whisper. He was already at the control panel, jabbing the alarm button. A bland, recorded voice echoed in the tiny space. "Help has been notified. Please remain calm." Remain calm. The words were a mockery. My vision began to tunnel, dark spots dancing at the edges. I slid down the wall, my legs unable to support me. The air was getting thicker, hotter. I was back in the root cellar, the smell of damp earth replaced by the sterile scent of my own fear. I can't breathe, I gasped, clawing at the collar of my blouse. Mark turned from the panel. And the look on his face, it wasn't concern. It wasn't fear. It was a cold, calculating irritation. For God's sake, Alara, get a hold of yourself, he snapped. It's a minor malfunction. They'll have it sorted in minutes. You know I can't. I was hyperventilating now, each breath a shallow, desperate gasp. Tears streamed down my face, hot and shameful. He sighed, a long, exasperated sound that cut deeper than any anger. He walked over and crouched in front of me, but it wasn't a comforting gesture. His eyes were hard. This is exactly what I was talking about, he said, his voice low and venomous. This weakness. This hysterical fragility. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? How it reflects on me? I stared at him, disbelief cutting through the panic. What? This phobia of yours, Alara. It's a liability. In our line of work, we meet clients in penthouses. We take elevators. I can't have my future wife, my business partner, collapsing into a puddle every time a door closes. The truth dawned on me, cold and horrifying. This wasn't just a malfunction. This was a test. A lesson. You knew this would happen? I whispered, the words barely audible. A slow, ugly smile twisted his lips. Let's just say I called in a favor with the building manager. A simulated fault. To see how you'd handle it. To teach you to overcome this silly little fear. Rage, white-hot and pure, erupted through the terror. You locked me in here? On purpose. I'm helping you, Alara, he said, his voice rising. I'm trying to make you stronger. For us. For our future. You need to learn that the world doesn't stop for your panic attacks. He stood up, looking down at me as I crumpled on the floor, a broken doll. Now stop this pathetic display. Pull yourself together. We have a very important man waiting for us, and I will not have you ruining this for me. The word me echoed in the tiny space. Not yes. Me. And in that moment something in me broke. Not my spirit, but the last fragile tether that bound me to him. The love I thought I felt curdled into something else, something dark and cold. The fear was still there, a physical pain in my chest, a constriction in my throat that made every breath a battle. But beneath it, a new emotion was taking root, fed by his betrayal. Hatred. I looked up at him, at the man I had shared a bed with, a life with, and I saw a stranger. A monster in a perfectly tailored suit. I hate you, I choked out, each word a struggle. He just smirked. You'll thank me for this one day. He turned his back on me as if my suffering was a minor inconvenience, a messy problem he'd rather not deal with. He pulled out his phone, probably to check his messages, the glow of the screen illuminating his indifferent profile. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness both inside and out. The recorded voice telling me to remain calm was a taunt. My body was shutting down. The breathless feeling was winning. I was going to die here in this polished brass coffin, a lesson for a man who never loved me. Just as the edges of my consciousness began to fray, a new sound cut through the silence. Not the alarm. Not Mark's impatient sighing. It was a voice, deep and resonant, filtered through the small speaker in the panel. This is Liam Blackwood. Is anyone in there? The voice was an anchor in my swirling, suffocating nightmare. It was calm, authoritative, and cut through the fog of my panic with the sharpness of a blade. Mark, who had been leaning against the wall with an air of bored martyrdom, jolted upright. His face, a moment ago a mask of cold superiority, paled with a sudden, sickening realization. The lesson had just been witnessed by the most important man in the city. Mr. Blackwood. Mark's voice was an octave too high, strained with forced cheer. Yes, it's Mark Evans and Alara Vance from Sterling and Sterling. Just a minor hiccup here. We'll be out in a jiffy. Jiffy? He sounded like a cartoon character. My own humiliation was momentarily eclipsed by the sheer, staggering spectacle of his. The building engineer is on his way, the voice, Liam Blackwood's voice, replied, its tone devoid of the panic or annoyance that would have been understandable. It was simply a statement of fact. Are either of you injured? No, we're perfectly fine. Mark chirped, shooting me a warning look that clearly said, don't you dare say a word. But I wasn't fine. I was far from fine. The initial shock of Blackwood's voice had given me a fleeting moment of clarity, but the walls were still pressing in, the air was still thick as syrup. A sob escaped my lips, a raw, helpless sound. I couldn't have stopped it if I tried. There was a pause on the other end of the intercom. A heavy, listening silence. "Miss Vance." The voice was different now. Softer. It was directed at me. "Alara? Can you hear me?" Use my first name. The simple human connection in that, the direct address, was a lifeline. I managed a weak, gasping sound of affirmation. "I need you to listen to my voice, Alara," he said, his tone low and steady, a rock in my churning sea of fear. "The engineer will be here in less than 5 minutes. You are safe. The structure is sound. You are not in danger. I want you to focus on your breathing. Can you do that for me?" I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. "Weiss," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Good. Breathe in through your nose. Fully. Fill your lungs." I tried, the air catching in my throat. "That's it. Now hold it. Count to 3 in your head." I did. 1, 2, 3. "Now release it through your mouth. Fully. Let all the tension go with the breath." He continued this way, his voice a calm, hypnotic guide. He didn't tell me to stop being silly or to get a grip. He didn't dismiss my fear. He simply acknowledged it and gave me a tool to manage it. With each cycle of breath, the terrifying tightness in my chest loosened its grip just a fraction. The dark spots receded. I was still terrified, still trapped, but I was no longer drowning. I was treading water, and his voice was keeping me afloat. Mark watched this exchange, his expression a toxic mix of fury and fear. He was being utterly sidelined, upstaged in his own cruel drama by the billionaire he was trying to impress. He was powerless to stop it. True to Blackwood's word, within a few minutes, we heard the whirring of machinery and the sound of voices outside. There was a series of clanks and whirs, and then with a soft ding, the brass doors shuddered and began to slide open. Blinding white light from the corridor flooded the elevator car. I flinched, bringing a hand up to shield my eyes. Standing directly in front of the opening was Liam Blackwood. The photographs in the business magazines did not do him justice. They captured the sharp, almost severe lines of his face, the strong jaw, the blade-like nose, the dark, intense brows, but they missed the sheer magnetic presence of the man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a simple, exquisitely cut black sweater and dark trousers. He wasn't handsome in a classical, pretty way, he was compelling. His eyes, a startling shade of gunmetal gray, swept over the scene in a single comprehensive glance. They took in Mark, who was already smoothing down his suit and putting on his best, "Everything is under control," smile. Then they landed on me. I was still huddled on the floor, my knees drawn to my chest, my face undoubtedly streaked with tears and mascara, my entire body trembling with the aftershocks of the panic attack. I must have looked a wreck, a pitiful, unprofessional mess. But his gaze didn't hold pity. It held a deep, unsettling intensity. It was as if he was absorbing every detail, my disheveled state, my raw fear, my position on the floor while Mark stood over me. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw a flicker of something in their depths. Not anger, but a cold, sharp understanding. "Mr. Blackwood," Mark boomed, stepping forward with an outstretched hand, effectively blocking me from view. "1,000 apologies for this unfortunate delay. These new buildings, you know. Glitches everywhere. Shall we proceed to the penthouse to discuss the designs?" Liam Blackwood ignored the proffered hand. He didn't even look at Mark. His eyes remained locked on me. "Are you able to stand, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. I nodded, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation. I tried to push myself up, but my legs were weak, watery. I stumbled. In a single fluid motion, Blackwood was inside the elevator. He moved past Mark as if he were a piece of furniture. He crouched down in front of me, his large frame blocking out the rest of the world. He didn't touch me, but he was close enough that I could smell the clean, subtle scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something else, something crisp and cold like a winter morning. "Take your time," he said, his voice for my ears only. "There is no rush." His proximity was unnerving but not threatening. It was solid, grounding, like the earth after a quake. Mark spluttered behind him. "Really, sir, that's not necessary. I can help her. Alara, come on now." Blackwood slowly turned his head and looked at Mark. It was just a look, devoid of any discernible emotion, but it silenced Mark instantly. It was the look a king might give a jester who had overstepped. He turned back to me. "Hey, he asked, offering a hand. I looked at his hand. It was large, capable, with long, strong fingers. A faint scar ran across the knuckles. After the betrayal I had just experienced, the simple courtesy of asking for permission felt profound. I nodded again, unable to speak. His hand enveloped mine. His skin was warm, his grip firm and sure. He didn't pull me, he simply provided a stable point for me to leverage myself. As I rose, my legs threatened to buckle and his other hand came up to steady my elbow. The touch was impersonal, professional, yet it sent a jolt of something, awareness, gratitude, sheer human contact, through my system. He guided me out of the elevator and into the bright, expansive corridor. I leaned against the cool marble wall, drawing in deep, shuddering breaths of the free, unconditioned air. Tasted like freedom. "The meeting is postponed," Blackwood announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. He was still looking at me, assessing my condition. "My driver will take you home, Ms. Vance. Or to a doctor if you prefer." "That's really not," Mark began. "I was not speaking to you," Blackwood cut him off, the temperature in the corridor seeming to drop several degrees. His gaze finally shifted to Mark, and this time the coldness in his eyes was unmistakable. "We will reschedule. Alone." The final word hung in the air, a death knell for Mark's career and our relationship. Mark looked like he'd been slapped. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. A man in a dark suit, the driver, appeared as if from nowhere. "James will see you home," Blackwood said to me, his voice softening marginally. "Rest." I wanted to thank him, to say something, anything, but my throat was closed with a tumult of emotions. Residual terror, burning shame, and a dawning, ferocious sense of vindication. All I could do was nod. As the driver gently guided me towards a private elevator, one I hadn't noticed before, I glanced back. Liam Blackwood was standing in the corridor, his arms crossed, watching me go. And Mark was standing by the open, malevolent door of the public lift, his face a mask of stunned, terrified fury. The lesson had been taught all right. But not to me. The student had become the master, and the master had just been dethroned. The game had changed. The car was a silent, rolling sanctuary. James, the driver, didn't speak, for which I was profoundly grateful. He simply navigated the city streets with a smooth, effortless competence that felt like a balm to my shattered nerves. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the world blur past. A world that seemed to have fundamentally shifted on its axis in the space of an hour. The physical symptoms of the panic attack slowly receded, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But my mind was a whirlwind. The image of Mark's face, cold and contemptuous as I gasped for air on the floor, played on a relentless loop. Then the sound of Liam Blackwood's voice, a calm command in the chaos. The feel of his hand steadying me. I was a contradiction of sensations. The icy chill of betrayal and the strange, lingering warmth of an unexpected rescue. When the car pulled up in front of my apartment building, the familiarity of it felt alien. This was the place I shared with the man who had willingly, calculatedly triggered my deepest terror. The four walls that had once represented safety and shared dreams now felt like a crime scene. "Would you like me to see you to your door, ma'am?" James asked, his voice respectful. "No, thank you. I'll be fine," I managed, my own voice hoarse from crying and hyperventilating. I walked into the empty apartment. The silence was deafening. I half expected Mark to be there, ready with some twisted justification, some new layer of gaslighting. But the space was still, holding its breath with me. I didn't cry. The tears had been spent in the elevator. Now a cold, clear fury began to crystallize. It was a sharp, focused energy so different from the chaotic terror of before. I walked through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. The books on the shelf were mostly his. The art on the walls had been chosen by him. The sleek, minimalist furniture was his style, a style I'd acquiesced to because I thought it was sophisticated. I saw now it was just cold like him. I went to the bedroom and pulled my largest suitcase from the closet. With a methodical, almost robotic efficiency, I began to pack. I didn't take everything. I took my clothes, my books, the few pieces of art that were truly mine, the small ceramic vase my grandmother had left me. I was carving myself out of this shared life, Piece by piece. My phone, which I had silenced for the meeting, began to vibrate on the bedside table. Mark's face flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Bust again. And again. He was probably panicking not about me but about his career. The silence from me was more terrifying to him than any screaming fit. After the 5th call I picked up. I didn't say anything. Alara. Jesus, finally. His voice was frantic, a far cry from the controlled, condescending man in the elevator. Where are you? Are you at the apartment? I'm packing, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Packing? What are you talking about? Brooke, we need to talk. What happened today? It was a misunderstanding. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. It was a harsh, ugly sound. A misunderstanding? You had me trapped in an elevator, Mark. You watched me have a panic attack and called it a lesson. I was trying to help you, he insisted, his voice rising with desperation. You have to see that. I love you and I can't stand to see you so weak. I was pushing you to be stronger. For us. There is no us, I said, the words final and absolute. There hasn't been for a long time if there ever was. You don't lock someone you love in a metal box to teach them a lesson. You don't watch them suffocate and call it love. Alara, please, he begged, the facade crumbling completely. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. I messed up. It was stupid. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under. The Blackwood account, he postponed the meeting. He said he'd reschedule with me alone. What does that mean? You have to talk to him. You have to smooth this over. And there was the heart of it. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about his career, his reputation, his future. I was just a tool, a prop, and when I'd malfunctioned he tried to fix me with cruelty. I have nothing to say to him, I said quietly. And I have nothing more to say to you. You can't do this, he screamed, the sound tinny and pathetic through the speaker. After everything I've done for you. I gave you a career. I brought you onto this project. You'd be nothing without me. The last vestiges of any lingering affection evaporated. Goodbye, Mark. And then my phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. Part of me thought it was Mark trying to circumvent the block. But something made me answer. Hello. Alara Vance? The voice was familiar, that same deep, resonant tone that had pulled me from the brink of panic. My heart stuttered. Mr. Blackwood? Liam, please, he said. I wanted to check on you. James informed me you arrived home safely. He'd asked his driver to report back on me. A week ago I might have found that intrusive, even creepy. Now, after the profound violation I'd experienced, his simple, direct concern felt like a shield. I'm managing, I said, unsure of what else to say. Thank you. For what you did. In the elevator. It was the least anyone could do, he replied, his tone dismissive, as if talking a woman out of a panic attack was an everyday occurrence. There was a pause. The meeting with Mr. Evans has been permanently cancelled. I wasn't surprised. I see. Your resignation email was forwarded to me by a mutual acquaintance at Sterling and Sterling. That did surprise me. How quickly the corporate gossip mill worked. I see, I said again, feeling inarticulate and exposed. The designs for the penthouse, he continued, his voice taking on a businesslike edge. The initial concepts. Were they yours? The question hung in the air. This was it. The moment of truth. I could protect Mark, cling to the remnants of a loyalty he had incinerated, or I could claim what was rightfully mine. I took a deep breath. Yes, they were mine. The structural integration of the smart glass, the fluid layout, the sustainable material selections. All of it. Mark is a good presenter, but he's not a visionary. I am. There was another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him thinking. I thought so, he said finally, and I could hear a thread of satisfaction in his voice. The creative spark was evident, but it was muted in his presentation today. Before the elevator incident. So he'd seen the designs. He'd known. What are your plans now, Alara? He asked. I don't know, I admitted, the vulnerability of my admission making my throat tight. I have a proposal for you, he said. A professional one. I am terminating my contract with Sterling and Sterling. I would like to hire you directly. Finish the penthouse. For me. The world tilted again. It was too much, too fast. You want to hire me? Directly. I believe in talent, he said simply. And I believe in recognizing it when I see it. Even when it's trapped in an elevator. The terms will be significantly more favorable than what Sterling and Sterling was offering you. Think about it. You don't have to answer now. He gave me an email address, a personal one, to contact if I was interested, and then with a final, quiet, "Take care of yourself, Alara," he was gone. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. In the span of a single day my life had been destroyed, and then from the ashes, a phoenix of an opportunity had risen, offered by the most powerful man I had ever met. Mark had tried to break me, to teach me a lesson about my place. But the lesson I was learning was a very different one. It was about my own strength, the value of my talent, and the strange, unpredictable paths that second chances can take. For 3 days I lived in the liminal space of the hotel room. I didn't contact Liam Blackwood. I didn't unblock Mark, though I knew from the barrage of emails from his account, pleading, angry, threatening, that he was spiraling. His messages were a toxic cocktail of professions of love, accusations of betrayal, and desperate pleas for me to fix things with Blackwood. They were the dying gasps of a man watching his carefully constructed world implode, and they only solidified my resolve. I spent those days sleeping, walking through the city parks, and thinking. Mostly thinking. I thought about the woman I had been with Mark. Accommodating, eager to please, willingly small to make his ego feel bigger. I thought about the terror in the elevator, a terror that had, in its own brutal way, burned that old version of me away. And I thought about Liam Blackwood's offer. It was terrifying. To work directly for a man like that. He was an island, a fortress of wealth and power. I'd be out of my depth. But the alternative was to slink away, my tail between my legs, to start from scratch at another firm, another Mark, another slow erosion of my soul. On the morning of the 4th day I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the address he had given me. Mr. Blackwood. Liam. Thank you for your offer and for your concern. I have considered your proposal, and I am willing to discuss the terms of a direct contract for the completion of the Ethelstan Tower penthouse. Sincerely, Lara Vance. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The response was almost immediate, as if he'd been waiting. Lara. My car will be at your hotel at 3 p.m. We will discuss the project at the site. No questions about how he knew where I was staying. Of course he knew. The simple authority of the message was staggering. At 3 p.m. precisely, a different, even more discreet black car pulled up outside. James was not driving. This was a different man, just as silent and efficient. We didn't go to the Ethelstan Tower's main entrance. Instead, the car descended into a private, underground garage, stopping before a single polished steel elevator door. It was his private lift. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stepped inside. It was spacious, paneled in a warm, brushed metal with a soft, ambient light. It felt nothing like the public tomb. It felt safe. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. I caught my breath. It was a vast, raw space, all concrete pillars and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking 360-degree panorama of the city. The sky was a canvas of bruised purples and fiery orange as the sun began to set. The space was empty, echoing, filled with nothing but potential and the fading daylight. And standing in the center of it, silhouetted against the sprawling cityscape, was Liam Blackwood. He turned as I entered. He was dressed more casually than before, in dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look even more like chips of granite. Alara, he said by way of greeting. He didn't smile, but his expression was open, attentive. Liam, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. This space is incredible. It has potential, he agreed, his gaze sweeping over the raw concrete. But it lacks a soul. That's what I hired Sterling and Sterling to provide. Or more accurately, what I believe you were hired to provide. He gestured for me to walk with him. We moved through the vast emptiness, our footsteps echoing. The initial concepts were good, he continued. The smart glass was inspired. But I want more. I don't want a showpiece. I want a home. A sanctuary. He stopped and looked directly at me. Tell me your vision. Not the one you pitched to Evans. The one you have in here. He tapped a finger against his own temple. So I told him. I forgot my nerves, forgot the surrealness of the situation. I talked about my passion. I described not just rooms but experiences. A library that would be a cocoon of warm wood and soft light. A retreat from the digital world he dominated. A master bathroom that would be a spa-like grotto, with a freestanding tub positioned to look out over the city. A living area that used the smart glass not as a gimmick, but as a way to harmonize with the environment, creating a seamless flow between the interior and the vast expanse of sky. I talked about materials, reclaimed oak, honed marble, textured plaster, that would feel lived in and warm, a counterpoint to the cold perfection of the building's exterior. I spoke of hidden technology, of spaces designed for quiet contemplation as much as for entertainment. I poured my heart out, my hands moving as I spoke, sketching shapes in the air. It was the pitch I had never been allowed to give. When I finally finished, slightly breathless, the sun had fully set, and the penthouse was lit only by the glittering grid of the city below. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Liam was watching me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I braced for rejection, for him to tell me it was too fanciful, too personal. Good, he said, a single solid word. That is what I want. Make it happen. Relief so potent it made me dizzy washed over me. Your terms, he said, switching back to business. You will be the principal designer on the project, reporting directly to me. You will have a dedicated budget and the authority to hire any subcontractors or specialists you require. Your fee will be triple what Sterling & Sterling was paying you, with a completion bonus of 20%. The numbers were astronomical. It was more than I would have made in 5 years at the firm. That's very generous, I stammered. It's the market rate for unique talent, he stated, as if it were a simple fact. The contract will be drawn up by my lawyers. You can have your people look it over. My people? I didn't have people. I had a suitcase in a hotel room. I'll review it myself, I said, finding a thread of steel in my voice. A ghost of a smile, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it, touched his lips. I expected you would. He handed me a key card. This grants you access to the private elevator and the site. I expect weekly updates. Don't disappoint me, Alara. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of expectation, and something in me rose to meet it. I won't. And so the Phoenix Project began. I threw myself into the work with a ferocious intensity one didn't know I possessed. I rented a small, bright studio apartment not far from the Ethelstan Tower. I hired a brilliant, no-nonsense structural engineer named Anya and a meticulous interior architect named David. We became a tight-knit team, fueled by coffee and a shared passion for the work. Liam was a demanding client. He was involved, precise, and his intelligence was formidable. Our meetings were intense, focused affairs. He questioned every decision not to undermine me, but to understand the reasoning behind it. He pushed me to think deeper, to refine, to perfect. It was exhausting and exhilarating. We never spoke of the elevator or of Mark. Our relationship was strictly, fiercely professional. Yet the memory of that day was the unspoken foundation of everything. He had seen me at my most vulnerable, and he had not looked away. He had offered a hand not out of pity, but out of respect for the professional he believed I could be. And I was determined to become that person. Weeks turned into a month. The raw space began to take shape. Walls went up, following the graceful curves I had envisioned. Samples of wood and stone littered the floor. The skeleton of my design was becoming a body. I was in the penthouse one evening, alone, reviewing the plumbing schematics for the master bathroom, when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello. Ilara. It was Mark. His voice was slurred, thick with drink or despair, probably both. You actually did it. You're working for him. I said nothing. He blacklisted me, you know, he slurred. Blackwood. No one in this city will touch me. My career is over. Are you happy? No, Mark, I said, my voice cold and clear. I'm not happy about your suffering. I'm indifferent. You are a stranger to me. He began to cry messy, ugly sobs. I'm sorry, Alara. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Please, you have to forgive me. You have to talk to him. Tell him it was a mistake. I love you. I need you. I listened to his breakdown, this man who had once held my heart and then my sanity in his hands and had crushed both without a second thought. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just a vast, empty space where he used to be. The lesson you tried to teach me in that elevator, Mark, I said quietly. I learned it. Just not the one you intended. I learned that I am stronger than you ever knew. And I learned that some betrayals are unforgivable. Do not contact me again. I ended the call and blocked the new number. I looked out at the city lights, my city now, my future being built around me in wood, glass, and stone. The past was begging for forgiveness at my feet. But I was already looking up towards the sky. The Phoenix Project was my salvation. Every sunrise brought a new delivery of Italian marble, slabs of richly grained oak, or a prototype of the custom-designed smart glass. The air was filled with the sounds of construction, the whir of drills, the rhythmic tapping of hammers, the occasional burst of Spanish from the tile setters. It was a symphony of creation and I was its conductor. My team Anya and David were miracles. They respected my vision and challenged me in all the right ways. We worked in a seamless, productive harmony that was the polar opposite of my time under Mark's thumb. Liam was a constant, quiet presence. He never intruded, but he was never far. He would appear in the penthouse, often unannounced, and walk the space with a quiet intensity. He'd run a hand over a newly installed wall of reclaimed brick, feeling its texture. He'd stand for long minutes before a window, watching the weather change over the skyline. Our interactions were brief, focused on the work. The coefficient of friction for this stone in the bathroom is too low when wet, he'd state, having clearly done his own research. I've specified a honed finish for that exact reason, I'd counter, pulling out the sample to show him. He'd nod, a curt, satisfied gesture. Good. There was a profound respect in our exchanges. He treated my expertise as law within the domain he had given me. It was empowering. The ghost of the trembling woman in the elevator was fading, replaced by a confident designer who commanded a multi-million-dollar project. One evening I was working late, finalizing the lighting plan. The penthouse was quiet, the workers gone for the day. The only light came from the moon and the city below, casting long, dramatic shadows across the open space. I was on the terrace, the night breeze cool on my skin, studying the way the ambient light interacted with the new stone cladding. I heard the soft whoosh of the private elevator. I turned as Liam stepped out. He was dressed in a dark suit, having clearly come from a formal event. The jacket was off, slung over his shoulder, his tie loosened. He looked tired, the sharp planes of his face etched with a deeper weariness than I'd seen before. "Elara," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "I didn't expect anyone to be here." "Just finishing up," I said, closing my binder. "The low-voltage wiring goes in tomorrow. I wanted to be sure of the placements." He came to stand beside me at the terrace railing, looking out at the same view I had been studying. We stood in a comfortable silence for a few moments, the city humming its endless song below us. "You've done remarkable work here," he said, not looking at me. It was the first outright personal praise he had offered. "Thank you," I said, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the mild night air. It's easy to be remarkable when you're given a blank slate and unlimited trust. He glanced at me then, his gray eyes catching the moonlight. "Trust is a currency I rarely spend. It has to be earned." The unspoken compliment hung between us. I had earned it. Not through pleading or manipulation but through competence and grit. "What was the event?" I asked, gesturing vaguely to his suit. "A charity gala. A room full of people trying to out-philanthropize each other while secretly calculating net worth and social advantage." He said it with a flat, cynical weariness that surprised me. This was the reality of his world, a world of glittering surfaces and hollow cores. "It sounds exhausting." "It is." He turned, leaning his back against the railing, facing the dark, cavernous space of the penthouse. This is real. Creating something. Building something that will have a life of its own. This is a legacy. Not another line on a tax return." I understood him then in a flash of insight. Liam Blackwood wasn't just a collector of assets. He was a builder. He was surrounded by people who consumed, but he needed to create. It was why he'd recognized the spark in my designs, even when presented by a fraud like Mark. It was why he'd taken a chance on me. "Why did you do it?" The question was out of my mouth before I could stop it. I clarified, my voice softer. "In the elevator. You didn't just call for help. You talked me down. You didn't have to do that." He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. The city's sounds filled the space between us. "I know what it is to be trapped," he said finally, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear it. To be powerless. It was a long time ago. The circumstances were different. But the feeling is the same. I saw it in your eyes. And I know that in that moment, the only thing that matters is a voice. An anchor. Anyone who would use that moment to teach a lesson. He shook his head, a flicker of genuine disgust crossing his features. They are not worthy of the air they breathe. A shiver ran down my spine. This was more than he had ever revealed about himself. This was a crack in the fortress walls, and through it I saw a glimpse of the man who had built them. A man who understood fear because he had conquered his own. Thank you, I whispered again, the words inadequate for the debt I felt. Don't thank me, he said, pushing off the railing. His moment of vulnerability was over, the mask of the cool billionaire back in place, but it felt thinner now. Just finish building my sanctuary. He left as quietly as he had arrived, the elevator swallowing him whole. I stood on the terrace for a long time after, the echo of his confession mingling with the city lights. The dynamic between us had shifted. It was no longer just client and designer. There was a thread of understanding, a shared history of survival, that now connected us. The next morning I arrived at the site to find a small, elegant box waiting for me on the makeshift plywood table I used as a desk. There was no card. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a key. Not a key card, but an old-fashioned, heavy brass key, beautifully crafted. It was the key to the penthouse's main door, a symbolic gesture of ultimate trust. As I was holding it, feeling its solid, cool weight in my palm, my phone rang. It was Anya. Ilara, you need to see this, she said, her voice tight. See what? Check the business section of the Times. A cold dread trickled down my spine. I pulled up the newspaper on my phone. And there was a short, brutal article. Sterling and Sterling severs ties with disgraced architect Mark Evans. Sources cite unprofessional conduct and the loss of the high-profile Blackwood account as catalysts for the termination. The article was a professional obituary. It was one thing for me to know his career was in ruins. It was another to see it printed in black and white for the entire city to read. It was Liam's doing. This was the final public act of his revenge on my behalf. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was a cold hollow. This was the shadow. The world of Liam Blackwood was one of absolute power. He could build you up and he could just as easily break your enemies. It was a terrifying, intoxicating power. And as I stood there, the heavy key in one hand and the news of Mark's destruction on my phone in the other, I realized I was no longer just an architect designing a penthouse. I was a player in a game whose rules I was only just beginning to understand. The past was not just begging for forgiveness. It was being systematically erased to make way for a future I wasn't sure I could control. The key felt like a brand in my pocket. Liam's silent, powerful gesture and the very public ruin of Mark created a dissonance in me that I couldn't shake. I was grateful for the justice, but unnerved by its absolute, merciless finality. This was the other side of the coin of Liam Blackwood's world. The side that didn't offer hands or quiet understanding, but delivered swift, irrevocable destruction. I threw myself even deeper into the work, the only place where I felt I had any agency. The penthouse was transforming. Walls were up, floors were laid, and the soul I had promised was beginning to inhabit the space. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves of dark walnut, was a particular triumph. It felt like the heart of the home, a place of quiet intelligence. I was in the library reviewing fabric swatches for the window seats, when David called me over, his face concerned. Ilara, there's a man downstairs. At the main lobby desk. He's causing a scene. He's demanding to see you. Says his name is Mark. My blood ran cold. I had built a new life, a new identity in this tower of glass and steel. And now the ghost from my past was at the gates, threatening to tear it all down. Tell security to remove him, I said, my voice tight. They've tried. He's persistent. And he's not technically trespassing. He's in the public lobby. He says he won't leave until he speaks with you. I knew Mark. Persistence was his specialty when he wanted something. And now, with nothing left to lose, he would be more dangerous than ever. I couldn't have him making a scene, disrupting the workers, potentially reaching Liam. This was my domain to protect. I'll handle it, I said, my stomach churning. I took the private elevator down to the garage and then walked up the ramp to the main lobby, wanting to avoid the very public spectacle of arriving in the elevator bank. He was there by the vast marble reception desk, his posture rigid. He looked diminished. His suit was rumpled, his hair was unkempt, and there was a wild, desperate light in his eyes that I had never seen before. The moment he saw me, he lunged forward, only to be gently but firmly held back by 2 security guards. Alara. Thank God. You have to talk to them. You have to tell them to let me see you. It's all right, I said to the guards, my voice surprisingly calm. I'll speak with him. But over there. I pointed to a quiet seating area tucked away from the main thoroughfare. The guards reluctantly released him, positioning themselves a discreet distance away, watching closely. Mark followed me to the chairs, his movements jerky. We sat. The air between us was thick with hostility and decay. Look at you, he sneered, his eyes raking over my simple work clothes, dusty jeans and a t-shirt. Playing the humble artist. But we both know you're sleeping in the penthouse suite, don't we? The vulgarity of the insinuation took my breath away. I am working, Mark. Something you wouldn't understand. Working, he spat. Is that what they call it? I'm ruined, Alara. My career is over. No one will return my calls. My name is Mud. And you're his little pet project. The damaged girl he rescued. Do you think he actually cares about you? About your talent? You're a novelty. A charity case. Once he's bored, he'll toss you out with the rest of the garbage. His words were meant to wound, to drag me down into his misery. And a part of me, the old, insecure part, flinched. But a larger, stronger part looked at the broken man in front of me and felt nothing but a profound, clean pity. You're wrong, I said, my voice low and steady. He respects my work because it's good. Something you were never capable of. You were always threatened by it, which is why you had to lock it away to try and control it. I loved you, he cried, his voice cracking. No, you didn't, I replied, the truth crystal clear now. You loved the idea of me. A talented, compliant woman who made you look good. The moment I showed a crack, the moment my humanity inconvenienced you, your love turned to cruelty. That's not love, Mark. That's ownership. He stared at me, his face a mess of conflicting emotions. Rage, despair, and a dawning, horrifying understanding that I was truly lost to him. You have to forgive me, he whispered, his bravado crumbling completely. Tears welled in his eyes. Please, Alara. I'm begging you. I have nothing left. If you forgive me, maybe I can start again. Please. I'm on my knees. He actually slid off the chair and onto his knees on the cold marble floor, his hands clasped in front of him like a supplicant. The one who locked me in the lift was now crying and begging for my forgiveness. This was the moment I had unconsciously played out in my head 100 times since it happened. I had thought I would feel triumphant, powerful, vindicated. I felt sick. I looked down at him, this pathetic figure groveling in a public lobby, and I felt nothing. No hatred, no satisfaction. Just a vast, weary sadness for the time we had both wasted. Get up, Mark, I said, my voice tired. You're embarrassing yourself. Not until you forgive me. I can't, I said, the words final and absolute. What you did was unforgivable. But my forgiveness wouldn't save you anyway. You didn't just betray me. You revealed who you are to the entire industry. That's not something my forgiveness can fix. You need to help yourself. Get up and walk away. Build a new life somewhere else. But do it without me. The fight went out of him. The tears fell freely now, carving paths through the shame on his face. He looked broken, utterly and completely. He slowly, clumsily got to his feet. He didn't look at me again. He just turned and shuffled towards the exit, a ghost leaving the scene of his own crime. I sat there for a long time after he was gone, trembling with adrenaline and a deep, emotional exhaustion. The sting of the past had lost its venom. It was just a memory now, a sad story about a man I used to know. As I stood to return to my sanctuary, to my future, I saw Liam. He was standing in the entrance to the private elevator corridor, watching me. How long had he been there? He had seen it all. The confrontation, the begging, my quiet, firm dismissal. He didn't say a word. He simply held the elevator door open for me. I walked towards him, my legs unsteady. I stepped into the elevator and he followed, the doors closing us in the quiet, safe space together. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer platitudes. He just stood beside me, a solid, silent presence as the elevator ascended. And in that silence I understood something else about Liam Blackwood. His protection wasn't always a public evisceration in the newspapers. Sometimes, it was simply bearing witness and offering a silent ride back to the world we were building together. The confrontation with Mark was a watershed. It felt as if a poison had been drained from my system. The lingering fear, the residual anger, the last vestiges of what it all evaporated in the face of his pathetic public breakdown. I was free. Truly, completely free. And with that freedom came a new boldness both in my life and in my work. The penthouse was nearing completion. The final stages were about curation, the art of placing the perfect object in the perfect light. I was no longer just following my initial vision. I was refining it, elevating it with a confidence that felt innate. I argued with Liam over a sculptural light fixture with a fervor that would have made my old self faint. "It's too ostentatious," I stated, hands on my hips, staring at the twisted metal and glass contraption he'd sourced from a famous Danish designer. "It's a statement piece," he countered, a faint glimmer of amusement in his eyes. He seemed to enjoy these debates. "It's a conversation killer. It screams, look at me and my expensive taste." "This space," I said, sweeping my arm around the serene, textured living area, "should whisper. It should invite people in, not shout at them." He studied me for a long moment, then the fixture. "What would you suggest?" "Something in blown glass. Organic, imperfect. It would catch the light, not dominate it." He gave a curt nod. "Find it." It was a victory, small but significant. He was deferring to my aesthetic judgment on a deeply personal level. The dynamic was shifting from client-designer to collaborators. One Saturday I was at the site alone, waiting for a delivery of hand-woven rugs from Morocco. The spring day was unseasonably warm, and the vast terrace doors were thrown open, letting a fresh breeze sweep through the rooms. I was arranging a collection of art books on the low table in the library when Liam arrived. He wasn't dressed for business. He wore jeans and a simple black t-shirt that stretched across his shoulders. He carried a paper bag from a local bakery and a cardboard tray with 2 coffee cups. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, which was a transparent lie. His penthouse was his neighborhood. "I was just taking a break," I said, which was also a lie. I never took breaks. He set the coffees and the bag on the plywood table. "I brought you a latte. And a Pano chocolate. I've noticed you forget to eat when you're in the zone." The simple, thoughtful act undid me more than any grand gesture could have. He noticed me. Not just my work but my habits, my flaws. "Thank you," I said, my throat unexpectedly tight. We took our coffee and pastries out to the terrace. We sat on the low stone wall, our legs dangling over the edge, 100 stories above the city. The sun was warm on our faces. For a while we just sat in silence, eating and drinking, watching the toy-like cars move through the streets below. "The space feels different now," he said finally. "It feels alive." "That's the goal," I replied. "A home, not a museum." "I've never really had a home," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Not since I was a boy. I've had houses, apartments, hotels, assets. But not a home." The confession was offered quietly, a piece of the puzzle that was Liam Blackwood. It explained the intensity of his involvement, his desire for a sanctuary. He wasn't just building a penthouse. He was building the concept of home from the ground up. "What happened?" I asked softly. He was silent for a moment and I thought he would retreat behind his walls. But he didn't. "My father lost everything when I was 12, he said, his voice flat as if reciting a fact sheet. "Bad investments, pride, a refusal to adapt. We lost the house, the cars, everything. We moved from a mansion to a 2-room apartment that smelled of cabbage and failure. The shame of it consumed him. It hardened me. I vowed I would never be powerless again. I would never be at the mercy of markets or other men's mistakes." I listened, my heart aching for the 12-year-old boy who had learned such a brutal lesson. "This," he said, gesturing to the tower around us, the city at our feet, "is the result of that vow. It's all a fortress. A defense against that feeling of powerlessness." "And the elevator?" I asked, remembering his words from weeks before. "You said you knew what it was to be trapped." He looked at me and for the first time I saw the ghost of that boy in his eyes. "The apartment. The poverty. The constant grinding anxiety. It's a different kind of box, but the walls are just as real. The feeling of being unable to escape your circumstances. It steals your breath just the same." A profound understanding passed between us. We were both survivors. We had both been trapped and we had both fought our way out. His battlefield had been the cutthroat world of tech. Mine had been the confines of a toxic relationship in my own mind. But the scars were similar. "You're not that boy anymore, Liam," I said gently. "Aren't I?" He gave a wry, humorless smile. "He's the engine. He's the reason for all of this. But he's a terrible architect for a home. He only knows how to build walls." I placed my hand on his, where it rested on the sun-warmed stone. It was a bold, impulsive gesture. His skin was warm. He stilled, his eyes dropping to our hands, then rising to meet my gaze. "Then let me be the architect," I whispered. The air between us crackled with a new, terrifying energy. The professional boundary we had so carefully maintained shimmered and threatened to dissolve. I saw a flicker of raw, unguarded need in his eyes, a reflection of the longing I felt stirring in my own chest. It was more than attraction. It was a recognition. He slowly turned his hand over, his fingers lacing through mine. His grip was firm, sure. Felt like a promise, like an answer. We sat there for a long time, hand in hand, suspended between the sky and the city, the past and the future. The shift had happened. The sanctuary I was building for him was no longer just a physical space. It was becoming the ground upon which we might, together, build something entirely new. The following week was charged with a new, unspoken tension. Every look, every brush of a hand, every quiet moment held the echo of that conversation on the terrace. We didn't speak of it directly. The work remained the priority, but it was now infused with a deeper, more personal significance. The final pieces were falling into place. The Moroccan rugs, with their deep, jewel-toned patterns, warmed the polished concrete floors. The organic, blown-glass light fixture I had found, a stunning, one-of-a-kind piece that looked like a captured cloud, was installed in the living area, casting a soft, ethereal glow. The penthouse was no longer a construction site. It was a home, breathing and alive. The official unveiling was scheduled for a week from Saturday. Liam was hosting a small, private gathering. A few business associates, some artists whose work was featured in the space, and me. It was the culmination of months of intense work, the final test of my vision. The night before the event, I was there for one last walkthrough. Everything was perfect. The setting sun streamed through the smart glass, bathing the interior in a golden, honeyed light. I stood in the center of the living area, turning slowly, taking it all in. I had done it. I had created something beautiful, something lasting. I heard the elevator and turned. Liam stepped out. He stopped, his eyes sweeping the room. He didn't look at the details, the finishes, the art. He looked at the space as a whole, at the way the light moved through it, at the feeling it evoked. He walked towards me, his footsteps silent on the rug. He stopped just in front of me, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "It's finished," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It's more than I ever imagined," he replied, his gaze intense, fixed on my face. "You built a soul for this place, Alara. You built a home." My heart was pounding. This was the moment. The professional relationship had reached its natural conclusion. The project was over. What happened now was uncharted territory. "The party tomorrow," I began, suddenly nervous. "Will be a formality," he finished for me. "A necessary performance. This is what matters." He gestured between the two of us. "This is real." "Is it?" I asked, the vulnerability I had fought so hard to overcome rising to the surface. "Or am I just another project? The damaged girl you fixed?" He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek. His touch was electric, sending a shockwave through my entire body. "You were never damaged. You were trapped. And you had the strength to free yourself long before I ever showed up. I just provided the key." Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of release, of healing. "You saw me," I whispered. "When I was at my worst, you saw something else." "I saw a reflection," he said, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. "I saw a fighter. I see the woman who not only survived but built this." He looked around us, then back at me, his gray eyes soft. "This is your strength, Alara. Your talent. Your heart. I just had the privilege of watching it unfold." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. Our breaths mingled. The city glittered below us, a universe of possibilities. "I don't want this to end," I confessed, the truth finally spoken aloud. It doesn't have to, he murmured. The project is over. But we are just beginning. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a gentle, tentative kiss. It was a claiming, a confirmation, a promise. It was filled with all the pent-up intensity, the shared understanding, the quiet respect, and the burgeoning love that had been growing between us for months. It was the foundation of the sanctuary we had built, finally made tangible. My arms wound around his neck and I kissed him back, pouring all my gratitude, my passion, my hope into that single universe-altering connection. When we finally broke apart, breathless, the world had rearranged itself. The penthouse was no longer just my masterpiece. It was the place where I had found my second love. The party the next night was a glittering success. People marveled at the design, at the seamless blend of warmth and modernity, of power and peace. Liam stayed by my side, his hand a constant, possessive presence on the small of my back. He introduced me not as the designer, but as Ilara. The way he said my name told everyone everything they needed to know. Later, as the guests began to leave, we found a quiet moment on the terrace, the same spot where our shift had begun. I have a new proposal for you, Liam said, his eyes reflecting the city lights. Another penthouse? I asked, smiling. A life, he said simply. Build a life with me. Here. In this sanctuary you created. I looked out at the endless, glittering horizon, then back at the man beside me. The man who had seen my terror and offered not pity but strength. The man who respected my mind and had fallen in love with my spirit. The path that had begun in a locked, darkened lift had led here, to this pinnacle, to this man, to this second chance. I took his hand, the key to my future, firmly in my grasp. Yes, I said. And as we stood together, overlooking the city, the one who had locked me in was a distant, fading memory. He was crying and begging for a forgiveness I had long since moved beyond. My breath was no longer stolen by fear, but by the breathtaking vista of a future I had designed myself, with a man who had taught me the most important lesson of all, that after the deepest darkness the brightest dawn awaits. The end.